All right, thank you everyone. We're very privileged to have our four guests for this evening. On the far left is David Gartrell, archivist for special collections here at the Davidson Library, and more specifically the American Religions Collection, which we have here and is one of the most unique and special collections of American religion in the country and the world. To his left, we have Isis Aquarian, historian and member of the Source family. To her left, we have Jodi Willie, publisher and director of the Source family documentary. And last but not least, to her left, we have Professor Ann Taves from the Religious Studies Department here at UC Santa Barbara. So what I'm hoping we can have is not just a panel discussion, but if anyone has any questions or comments, to feel free to join in the conversation. I'd like to start with where I think, in no small measure, this whole project started, is with you, Isis, and your camera. I know when I was a photographer, whenever I was out shooting, I could always kind of see down the road a possible image that was going to come out of that. And in that image, some sort of audience at some place or some time. I always had the intention that someone would be looking at this. When you were documenting life in the Source family, what was your intention or your projection? Did you see an archive? Did you see something like this? Or were you just trying to keep up and capture what you could capture?
I was obeying the moment, I call it sometimes. I don't know if I saw anything, but I intuitively knew that I don't know if I particularly saw this down the road. I knew I just had to say a legacy, and I knew that I was part of something very important. And I also believe in reincarnation. I knew that for me, I had made these agreements with this person, that soul, before even reincarnating. And that's really all I needed to know. And the rest of it was kind of dealt with on another level. And I just did what I did. That was my role.
You mentioned in the documentary that you saw most things through the lens of a camera. Could you kind of just give more detail to that? How often were you documenting something on an average day, and what's the scope of the end result? What would the archives look like if they were put into a room?
The archives are big. A lot hasn't even survived. But what did survive is we have a lot. I had 500 cassette tapes of my meditation, 500 albums, and of him talking. Thousands and thousands of slides and negatives, we want to do a book with. Drawings, diaries, photo albums, some clothing articles.
A lot of newspaper articles.
Yeah, a lot of what happened that substantiated us and documented our journey without me even having to do it. As far as the photo taking, I came in doing the photos, but then when I started doing recording, and then I became a family administrator, and then I was working more with them, I just didn't have time. So I did give the camera off to other people, and I would say there's probably 3 solid family photographers, and that we all would interchange or pick up the camera at different times.
But you were always the archivist, right? Like
I was doing it only when I believed in that, for sure, or worried about it.
And this would be a question for David. There's that well-worn saying that history is written by the victors, but a lot of times history seems to be written by the best preserved. So could you put that into perspective, David? How unique is what we have in the Source family compared to other groups that were around? How unusual or how special is it to have such a collection that's preserved?
I've never seen anything like it. Most of the material that we have in the American Religions collection started as a collection by Gordon Melton, who is with the Institute for the Study of American Religion, and who put together an encyclopedia of American religion that describes religious groups. So it was largely Gordon collecting things bit by bit, documenting these different groups from them or about them. It just is really a varied collection. We do have other discrete collections that come from other collectors devoted to one particular area, like, say, Tibetan Buddhism in California. And that can be a large collection, but very scattered. I've never seen such an intentional documentation from the first-hand account by a member of the group ever. So it's definitely, it's unique.
Wow, thank you.
It's impressive.
I think there were a lot of groups. I'm finding out by talking to professors that there was a lot of groups around, and tens of thousands of groups in the 60s and 70s, and nobody knew about each other. And we've been told that the only reason they're not even being talked about now is because they didn't keep anything, or it was lost. So I think to answer part of your question, I think I'm starting to maybe just now grasp fully, what was done, and try to reason a little bit. I know Jodi's got some takes on that too.
I've gotten to know some members of some other groups as well over the years, and I found that it seems like a lot of groups, they actually do document in some way or another, but then things just get lost over the years. There's a fire or a flood or storage bills that are unpaid. But I heard from Eileen Barker, the historian, that the Unification Church has quite a big archive, I know that the Sunburst Farms, right, who are right around here. There are a lot of photographs that exist from Sunburst Farms, and I think the Live Israel family has some that survive too, but obviously nothing quite that extensive.
Yeah, I have two questions. I guess they're both for you, Alexis. The first has to do with your role as the photographer, and it has often puzzled me. I guess I understand it. The following scenario: photographer is in Vietnam, takes film of a baby burning or something. And there's the camera is the thing between the photographer, the person, and what's happening out there, the person. And the photographer's job is to take the films and to document. And it's always, I always wondered, well, why doesn't the photographer put the fire out? Is the picture more important than the burning baby, etc.? This kind of issue. And so my first question was, given your dual role, photographer and the record keeper and documenter, as well as member and participant, did you ever come across a tension in this kind of way, whether you were photographing good or bad, as the case may be?
Well, there's only so many of us around that everything could have been or would have been taken care of. I didn't, whatever I was filming. I mean, I don't know. I can't say if I saw a burning baby that I photographed it or put the camera down and say that. I don't know. I think a photographer who was doing something like that, I think they were in an altered state. begin with. Because when you are looking through another eye, you're looking through the lens of a camera, that's another world.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I really, a lot of the times, I don't think I was fully physically present. You know, so that's just my opinion. Because that was the first time I had any Jodi captured on film. She was interviewing me, and it surprised me that I even went where I went. And because that was the first time I ever even questioned any of it or felt, wait a minute, you know, is that really weird, or was it, you know?
When you said it was weird in a film.
Yeah, that was the first time I ever, even in 40 years, questioned what was happening when I did through the lens of the camera, like watching my beloved body. You know, because up to that point I understood it pretty well. And so, I don't know. It's an interesting thing. I was driven. It was a force beyond me to make sure this was done, to begin with. Live in an altered reality to begin with. And when you look through the lens of the camera, it's an altered reality. And people have asked me, did that not separate you? And actually, I thought about it, and it didn't. I actually felt more included and focused. There was no peripheral anything happening, the main true thing, and I actually feel, because I was looking through the camera, I got more out of it than maybe people around.
Yeah, and I can see where you said earlier that maybe may not have been circumstances which would have needed an intervention kind of
Right.
You know, just building off of that, it's so interesting you say, you know, that you got more out of it than the people around it. I also have a book publishing company, and I've worked with 3 individuals, 2 other individuals besides ISIS, who are amateur photographers who have amassed these incredible archives that document aspects of our cultural history that are sort of otherwise ignored. And one of them he was a hi-fi repairman who had these cameras and documented country music festivals in the 60s with color slide film. People like Johnny Cash and George Jones and all of these lesser-known country figures in these music festivals that turned out to be historically important, but no one documented them during the time. And he had thousands of these incredible images, and he also recorded audio of these performances that reflect a style of country music that most people don't know, because the studio recording was made by people with different ideas of music. Gary Lee Bowens was another guy who was an amateur fan. He was a fan photographer who would stay outside, Broadway or talk shows waiting for hours to get one photo of a movie star. And he amassed this massive archive of photographs from 1966 to 1980 of famous people. And they have very similar personalities. Isis and Gary and Leon, who took these photographs, they're all very single-minded, and they all are obsessive collectors in some way. And so it's really interesting to me. You know, Isis, I found that of those 3 collections, Isis is actually the largest. I couldn't believe what I found in hers. But they all have similarities, and to me, they're so special because the reason why I had to publish them was because there's a view of history that we have of groups like the Source Family and movie stars and country music singers, and that history is dictated by people who get paid to take pictures of them, usually for the record company or for, because they're freelance photographers. And for me, there's an essence that is captured when you have a photograph taken by someone who's doing it just for the love of it, or because they have this passion that they can't even explain, that they're not thinking about, but it's not a career-motivated passion. And we're able to get a whole new view of these subcultures by looking through the eyes of the people who lived it, or the people who are very close to it. And so to me, that's one of the greatest gifts that Isis gives us, and that she gave me as an editor, to be able to sort of begin to see that, the Source Family in a new way.
And I think that brings up a question that I've had and I continue to have, and I asked it to Isis years ago, is when you have such an archive and you're in a sense in control of your legacy. The book and the documentary, it's very open, and if I was to tell my own history, I don't know if I would include as many things as you do. And especially with new religious movements, it's very difficult to find something that's balanced and critical and sympathetic. It's a lot of times it usually falls one way or the
It was
other.
not whitewashed, and I had a huge problem with that very beginning. You know, it was a German familiar process when working with Jodi. I pretty much freaked out. You know, and I went, what? You know, and because, you know, my love for it is my journey. It's pure for me. And it was a process to come to realize that you owe it. And through Jodi, I know this, we worked for years on this, that you owe it to the legacy, you owe it to history, you owe it to the study by scholars and students to give all sides. You know, and to allow those sides and not judge it, because it was all part of it. They all make up the tapestry of the whole. And little by little, I came to realize that. And I think it's brilliant. You know, she warned me right from the beginning that she wasn't even going to do it if I did not allow it. And it's been amazing. And I'm quite pleased with the way it came out, because she was right.
I just want to explain a little bit for people who are wondering. So the book, what happened was I originally talked to Isis. She and her brother, Electricity, had written a book that they published 250 copies of. And I saw that book, I heard about it, and through my publishing company, signed her on to do a book to expand the material for a more general, you know, audience. And so what we did was we worked together very closely on the text of the new book. And a lot of the text is actually written by me, but it's Isis's words, you know, and basically me interviewing her and you know, and talking to her about it. And so there were stories that were not in the book that she created with Electricity, because for me, as a publisher, and also being obsessed with these kind of groups, as I have been for years, I noticed I had a lot of books by people who are in groups, and then a lot of popular culture books and books by scholars, and I noticed that there were these books that were written by family members that were always whitewashed, you know, but they were like official history by groups, and then there were these groups that were, or these books that were written by people that were totally written by like New York writers who had no understanding of the reality of the groups. You could tell that they were sensationalizing the story, you know, like the family, like Ed Sanders' version of the Process Church for the family, and having known Process Church members, realizing how misguided a lot of these writers were. And so for me, when I met Isis, I was thrilled, because I was like, wow, we've got the opportunity to really, you know, have the people tell the stories in their own words, but also tell it all. You know, and I thank Isis so much for being open, because at first when we talked about that, you know, there were stories that like Fabio's mushroom trip, when he said, I'm not God, I'm just a man. And I was just like, we have to tell that story, and you got to tell it. As in the book, and there were the bank robberies. You know, when I found out the bank robberies, I was just like, that's history. I did this years ago. Don't worry about it. But I really, you know, give her a lot of credit for that, because it does give a new, you know, perspective.
Did that probably answer your question?
Sir, the lady has the microphone. Thank you.
One of the things that I think is really striking about the book is the way that you had the light colored text, and then you had quotations from other people, so that there's multiple voices in the book.
Oh my God. There was like hundreds, we had a report of 150, there's more than 150. And we all have a different reality of the same thing. And we did not know that until we started coming together. And I would say one thing, and three people would go, no, that's not what happened. And we actually had fights about it. And then we finally realized, wait a minute, everybody saw something different in the way that they saw it. They needed it, whatever. And we came to the conclusion that we all had our own reality within it. Allow it, that was the journey. And try not to judge it. It's been a process for all of us.
So when did you decide, and how did you decide to write it in this kind of format?
When I was working with Jodi, because she said, okay, what do you want? Do you want just another book like this, that's goody-goody two-shoes, about a man and his family and religion, and it's not going to last 2 days. There'll be another book. Nobody's going to want to read it and know about it. And I no, not really. So, it's, like I said, it was a process that Jodi pulled out of me because of her vision. And I had a vision, and we just came together with it, and we balanced it, merged it. And I allowed other people their opinion. I didn't agree with it. I had trouble with some of it. But that was my process. That's our process in working with each other 40 years later, and it's been messy. I got to tell you, it's been very messy.
It's been so interesting just knowing Isis over the years and working with her actively that way, because she was pretty obstinate in the beginning, like pretty hardcore about her line, the party line for the family. But you were the one who recommended that we go and meet with people, meet with different people. And actually, she was the one who encouraged me to start filming stuff. And because I was originally just going to bring a tape recorder, and she was like, oh, we've got to film it. I mean, she really is much more of a documentarian than I am. And I've learned so much from her. And that's another thing about working with these amateur historians. I found that each one of them, and Isis especially, they have the sensibility of like an experienced artist or documentarian or historian, but they just don't have the same language because they haven't gone to art school or film school or whatever. But their intuition is usually stronger because of that as well. And so she was kind of an incredible person to work with. And for me, I just love oral history books myself. Like I feel like they age better than any other books because you get the words straight from the horse's mouth. And so that's why we Isis had already collected some stories before we worked together, and when I saw those, I was like, whoa, they're so good. Let's get more.
Isis just spoke to the question that I was asked, that I didn't ask.
Do you feel there are any perspectives from members of the family you want to bring?
What?
Were there any perspectives you feel that the documentary was missing?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot of things. Yes.
Is there any?
Well, watch them.
I would say that first of all, there's so much that's not in the film. Really important key moments that happened in family history that we just could not fit in the film. The film needs to be like an 8-part series to get all the main. That's not even including just the incredible relationships between people. But what I did, for me, I did the best I could to reflect the overall truth of the family after having not just gotten to know Isis for a long time, but I've been interviewing about 40 family members over, years, for well over 1,000 hours spending time with all of them. And for me as a filmmaker, my responsibility to the material was I wanted to reflect the overall truth that I took in. And then I'd be talking to people who, Isis might not have liked, or they had issues with Isis. I got to hear all of the interpersonal drama between everybody, and then would talk to another family member who had a totally different perspective. He was kind of the one who was the watcher of the family. So there were all these different types in the family, and what I realized was that the Source family was kind of probably like any religion is, or any social group of people, where you've got the fundamentalists on one end of the spectrum, and then you have the alchemists on the other end. You've got the people who come in and the people who like a structure, they like to be told what to do, and the people who don't really like to be told what to do, but they'll learn from someone if there's somebody teaching them something they don't know. And that's exactly what we had in the Source family. It was a full spectrum. So I wanted to reflect that in the film. And also, in the book too, but with the book, I think for me it was more important to really let Isis drive it, because I've never seen a book by a believer about this that was for a broad audience. Like I really wanted the book to be written in a way where we could have the New York Times write about it, not just academics or indie press, but really I wanted it to get big, and we did. I mean, it was in the New York Times and it was on NPR, and from the believer's point of view. So it allowed people to popular culture to be able to look at, this experience through new eyes a little bit.
And also, almost everybody was in this response until I did the book. And they were kind of forced to come out. Their husbands or wives never knew anything about it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The kids, like just last night in Ventura, we had.
Oh, it's fascinating. Yeah, there were some people who would be interviewed, yes, to just answer your question a little more fully. And there were also things I uncovered that I still uncovered, because I'm still interviewing people in ISIS and I'm still talking. I'm totally obsessed. I've been for years, doing every little detail, trying to learn, but I'm still learning stuff that blows my mind all the time, that shocks me, And there are some people who really just did the experience away, and some people who thought probably it was satanic afterwards, and then became born-again Christians, and then dropped the born-again Christian thing, and then some people who remained born-again Christians. It's so interesting how people processed it so differently, and that's what I really, came to see about the project as well. That it really wasn't even so much about my opinion of, first of all, it was well, was Father Yoda a good guy or a bad guy? Then it was well, he was a human being, you know what I mean? But it's not even about my judgment at all about it. It was really about how these people each processed this experience and came out of it with completely different, gifts or burdens or whatever they came out of it. It's totally fascinating. But some people still feel weird about it. I think the film has helped a lot of people and has allowed them to show it to their families so they have a better understanding of it. It seems to have been healing, which makes me and Isis really happy. Overall healing experience. But yeah.
As you spoke of a lack of familiarity with some of the contemporary religious movements that may or may not have been similar in certain respects. There were several references in the film itself to a kind of bricolage happening, kind of compilation happening in the movement and family itself, sort of pulling from different historical sources, whether they be the Knights Templar or otherwise. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that, either the sort of source material for the source family in terms of what was sort of taken or used or utilized, or if such things exist in the archive too.
We wanted to get caught up in this incarnation. And we had pools to being together many lifetimes, and that's what we experienced. We investigated, Jim Baker did, and brought us along on that journey of every known religion, every teaching, every race, every nationality, the mystery school teachings. We became a mystery school teaching, basically. All of it. So even if we were getting it from somebody else's life, it could have been on us another life. That's the way we felt about it. It could, we could be 200 years from now reading in another lifetime about us now. So whatever, it was like gold back then. You couldn't find a lot of stuff. There wasn't a lot of stuff in the 60s and early 70s besides secret teachings by Henry P. Hall or maybe Jim Fearson. But
he had as far as his foundation before him.
The Vedanta, the yogis, whatever he could find, whatever we could find, the sacred name, the Kabbalah, so what you're asking, all of it, we embraced it, we took from it what we wanted and needed and applied it to a new paradigm that we knew was upon us. We made it our own and did what we wanted, whether we changed it or whatever. Does that answer your question? And then there was a point where he actually started channeling his own wisdom teachings, during morning meditations. But
think that's one of the many reasons why the Source family is so fascinating, is that in a very real way, you can see the Source family as the history of esoteric Los Angeles combined. It's almost like when you make a reduction sauce. We're very used to, where do all the weird religions come from? Southern California. At the turn of the century, it was Chicago, and that was the default that everyone, another weird cult must be Chicago. In the 20s, that moved to Los Angeles, in no small part because the teachers from Chicago literally picked up and moved to Los Angeles. All these positive thinking, New Thought, occultist teachers. Paul Foster Case comes to Los Angeles, starts the Builders of the Atom that brings in tarot and Kabbalah. You have all these yoga teachers, you have Krishnamurti, everyone coming to Southern California. In the 40s and 50s, you have the East-West Cultural Center, and then the 60s happened. It seems like the Source family kind of took all that, Manly Hall coming up in the 20s, and just brought that all into that energy in the late 60s. And what I think is even more interesting is when you look at things coming out of Southern California now, in 2013, what is it? It's raw food, it's tantric sex, it's communal living, it's homesteading, it's all of these things that were being done in the Source family. So it's an interesting kind of fulcrum. But it sounds like from the film, you guys took that in a really exaggerated form. Instead of a condensed 20th century, it's ancient mystery teachings and the age of Aquarius, 1,000 years to come.
That's very, very, very true.
What kind of sense of time was there in the family?
We did not live in time. We removed ourselves from this society, and we lived by man's. We did not live by man's law. We lived by spiritual law, and we had our own reality, and we didn't go anywhere. We had everything we needed among ourselves. The only time we went out was when we went to the restaurant, and they came to us. But other than that, we lived in our own world. And when you live in your own world like that, and you have your own world, time is not the way it is when you come back to this world, or by man's law.
This is something that Ann and I have been talking about back and forth with the Source family, is that there's this very real sense that it's another world. I know again and again the documentary.
We had trouble when we left that, and tried, when we looked at that world from this world, and it didn't make sense. You cannot do that. You cannot intermingle the two worlds and make sense out of them.
And that's what I think part of the melancholy towards the end is you have this sense that there was a really great play that was going on, and then without anyone knowing it, the curtain's down, the lights are up, and everyone's looking around, what the heck do we do? We're in the chairs. There was a lot of mentions throughout the film. People talked about roles. This was the role that I played. I assumed this role. Father Yod assumed this role. It seems like there was a very... want to be careful how I use the word. It almost seemed to be like a sense of play, almost like a performative putting on a drama. That this was something that everyone was kind of consciously entering.
Yes. Question relating to that. With regard to the I can speak about that. With regard to the practice of magic, given that oftentimes involves such a theatricality, and given that there were a number of costumes in different garbs in different periods, I was wondering if there were any kind of huge magical productions, if there were recorded at all.
Production.
Well, I mean, magic rituals, even if it's rituals, things of that nature.
Of course, there was rituals and ceremonies that became part of our life.
Were these recorded at all? And then,
yes.
Okay.
They weren't recorded as, okay, we're going to have a play or production or ritual now. And it was spontaneous, or they just happened, and then everybody was part of it. We were all, when you have that many people living in one house like that, you come to a point where you're all on the same frequency. We basically were moving as one frequency. So it was a very easy thing to do when something happened. You know, when there was an initiation, we called it. There was a time I was just talking about where a baby was born and the baby died 9 hours later. But the blood from the placenta just was put in a 7 precious metal bowl. This is something Father just did. And he had all this come before him, and with his thumb, he, you know, put the blood on our forehead and sealed this. So there were rituals like that where he said, okay, you've been named, you know, sealed in the blood, and that sealed this as a family. So there was rituals in tantric and sex magic that we explored. You know, we took everything to as high as we could for the better we could, the spiritual purposes. As it was stated in the film, it wasn't for lust, it wasn't for the darkness. There was no ever hurt or harm intended. It was for our own growth, for our own understanding. You know, because these are laws and rituals from Solomon's time. You know, these are things that are mystery school teachings that have a reason and a purpose, and there are polarities within them, and you have to be really careful, you know, between the light and the darker.
Can I say something too? You know, from just to like condense it, they were practicing ritual magicians, but decidedly white magicians. Like that, he was very emphatic that they were white magicians. And you know, one thing going back, you were asking about the foundational practice. What I learned, and just correct me if I'm off here, but what I learned, you know, Jim Baker also had this very interesting background. He was you know, a weightlifter. He was a judo instructor. He was very much about the body. And when he came out to Los Angeles in the 40s, he got involved with the Nature Boys. So does anybody here know about the Nature Boy movement? So it's like a really interesting movement that has been very little written about. But people like Jack LaLanne and Eden Alves and others, it was like a proto-beatnik, proto-hippie movement descended from the Nachtermensch movement, right? Is that right? From the Germans in the late 1800s, who were basically, you know, anti-industrial. It was an anti-industrial movement where there was nature worship and mysticism and nudism that goes back to like ancient Germany. So the Nature Boys were out there. Jim Baker was learning from them about the body, and when he was first getting into spirituality with his wife, they were into Western magic. So the Western magical traditions, teachings of Manly Hall was what he first got into. And then he got into Vedanta. And then he got into Yogi Bhajan, but one of the limitations that drove him crazy about Yogi Bhajan was that people were supposed to be celibate in 3HO when he was there, and he felt like that was a limited way to use the Kundalini energy that they were learning about. So it made logical sense to me anyway that he picked up a copy of, you know, Lewis Collins' book on sex magic, and that just kind of changed everything, you know, in the family. And so for him, I feel like just as an outsider, he finally found this way to reconcile his body, you know, his interest in the body, his physicality, his spirituality, by understanding the esoteric teachings, you know, the Western magical teachings. And they were very disciplined source family. I mean, that's the thing. The film kind of leads you to think that maybe they were just, you know, he was kind of casually like exploring all of these things, but I think he was very deep into those traditions. And then what would happen is he would just, you know, pick up Book of the Law or something, you know, and then I would like listening to the audio tapes. I remember hearing one day he was like, "Yeah, I read this book of the Law. Yeah, lots of interesting stuff in there. Lots of garbage." And he was like, "Yeah, Crowley, you know, it was the way he broke down Crowley was so brilliant. It was just like, he took pleasure to its furthest reaches, and he found God that way," he said, "but, you know, he let it go to his head, and he died in the basement, broke, and ruined the lives of everybody around him." Like, he had this very interesting take on it. So I found from just listening to the audio, because I listened to so many hours of it, is that he had like a deep understanding of the stuff. It wasn't just a shallow, you know, thing.
Okay, so
That's my point of view.
picking up directly on that,
Yeah.
what he was saying about Crowley.
Yeah.
I mean, I got, you're talking about being very disciplined in your reading but there's also the sense in the film, and there's people, you know, putting in their perspective of it's winging out of control.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because they were disciplined for a while. But there was, I mean, and he's also a man of paradox, you know, so they had discipline in that they had their morning meditation. Every morning without fail, they were doing these breathing techniques and chanting, but he was also wildly experimental, you know.
And as it got, I mean, I saw it in the way that you depicted it, I saw it getting more, well, I don't know if it's more experimental, but, you know, the experimentation continues. Yeah. And then being noticed more and more, or feeling more and more noticed or at risk in LA, then the decisions move to Hawaii, and then Hawaii turning out so terribly. So I was wrestling with that as I was watching, wondering, so how much is a certain paranoia coming in as coming out of how everything's happening internally, how much is actually from the outside, and then what's happening at the end, where he decides to go off and play, and is saying things, I can't remember if this was kind of mushroom stuff, or I don't have anything more to teach.
No, he was done.
Yeah, so
They got to, see, this person had an MO all of his life. It was his journey, and he would go on it, and he would reach a certain stage where that part of his journey was done, and he would walk out of it. He would leave his wife, his children, and that he did that. That's been like documented his whole life. I meant that. There's no, wait a minute, this is a thread. He was on a journey, it was his journey, and he kept going on it. You know, like we're all supposed to be doing. When he was done with one part and wanted to move on, that part couldn't go with him. It didn't see his vision, it didn't see the rest of his journey. And he couldn't take them, he left them because they couldn't go. It's not like they couldn't go with him. They were crystallized at a certain point. He moved on. He did the same thing when he came to California and had his wife and had 3 sons, and that just went so far. And he left. The same thing happened with Robin. It was like the Robin and Jim show. And then he started getting more into another area of his journey. This was his journey. And she couldn't go that far. She wouldn't go there with him. So he basically even left her. And it got to where the end that you're talking about, he even left us, is what he did. It was done. He tried to disperse us twice. We would not let him do that. We said, no, we're not leaving, you're not leaving, we're not. He had no out. Where was he going to go? There's 200 people that would have followed him. He couldn't leave us, there was no out. He was done.
So finally,
He
there
was
was a
done.
situation he couldn't leave,
No,
rather
he
than
couldn't.
the way he did it.
So what he did was he tested fate. He could have just jumped off the mountain, but he put a hand glider on, and he said, this takes me back to the first golden age when men had wings and men used to fly off mountains, and he remembered that. And he said, I want to do that again. And he said, if I'm supposed to go, Jesus is in the breath, he'll protect me, or he won't. I mean, he saw it as an opportunity to either go or not go. And I think there's only certain questions that he can answer. I think there's things that we cannot answer for him. What was he thinking, or at that time, or whatever. He was done with the family. He said, truth be known, I would just like from Kushla on to go off and live somewhere. And the rest of the family, go off and start your journey now, start your path. I'm giving you everything. Let me just retire and be in peace. And then he said, but now I've got 3 women and I've got 3 babies, so now that's my responsibility. And then he said, and then I have the rest of my life, and then. And so, yeah. So, I'm not, we are not responsible for him doing what he did. He's responsible for that. He's the only one that can answer certain questions. It was his path and his journey. I was there as a witness. I never judged it, and I still don't judge it. You know.
It's funny, doing a lot of detailed research on 3HO, and there's that link between Father Yodi and Yogi Bhajan. It's almost like there's a 7-year itch for being a guru. I know one of Yogi Bhajan's, one of the inner circle.
It's a responsibility.
Well, one of the inner circle people.
He didn't school it because he had nobody else. He didn't know what to do with himself. Father Yogi was a strong animal man, and that's the only way I think he held on without completely blowing it more than what happened.
That's what one of Yogi Bhajan's students told me around 1975. Yogi Bhajan called him in, and they basically had a rap session about how could this end. Yogi Bhajan told him, this is too much, I'm kind of trapped, and they put out different options. Well, you could appoint this person, well, you could disperse everyone, you could say, you know, you're off on your own, and of course that never happened, and he, you know, followed his own thing. But I think it's very interesting. It's hard to think of these types of people as a type, but it seems like it's almost like there's a shelf life for how long you can be in such a role before.
Because Zen said it perfectly. In the end, we're our own. I don't know exactly how he put it, but I know it's really brilliant. I love what he said. You know, with the life of the teacher is limited. In the end, we are supposed to be our own teachers and masters and do our own journey, our own path. And so that's what I did. You know, that's why. What's the shelf life?
One of the things that was so interesting to me about learning the story of the end of, you know, Father Yoda, just like the rise of the family and the decline of the family, was like on the outside it appears to be a typical cult story, right? Where the leader starts out with all these good intentions, and then there's this period that was sort of like halcyon, you know, period, and then it gets to a certain point where, you know, the hubris, like it gets to his head, and then things start to decline, and then there's like a flame out. And what I thought was really interesting about Jamaica was that, unlike people like Jim Jones, who, you know, at the end, you know, when things start to, the pressure melts, things start to decline, they have this kind of split, you know, where, you know, I feel like Jim Jones, it's almost like the Christian. We have one problem with certain aspects of dualistic thinking, where you sort of push the darkness away and don't address it. And in the Source family, because they were occultists, you know, they were sort of addressing like the shadow and the light, and everything was they were accepting of all of it as the totality of the whole. And I feel like that's one reason why he was able to stay human at the end and really like retain this humility that I thought was kind of incredible. Like I really feel that he actually advanced further along his journey, you know, after he realized, oh, I'm not a God anymore. Even though he always said to the family members, you're all God. That was, you know, their ideas, we're all God, it was the totality. There was still a moment where they kind of got, for me interviewing a bunch of them, a little, you know, carried away thinking, well, you're the highest speaking consciousness on the planet, you're God, you're here, you know. But for him to come back down, to go from like the man to the God and back down to the man journey again, I thought was really kind of beautiful. It was interesting. He was able to hold on to that aspect and not take anybody with him, you know, at least.
In some ways, the Source family is interesting because it's almost like a never-ending spoiler compared to other new religious movements. A lot of things that you would only find with great shock and surprise after a lot of digging, they're all out there in the open. Unlike some groups where it's this big revelation that the leader had a relationship with women in the inner circle, it was open, it was public, it was known in the Source family. And that's one of the things I found fascinating about the documentary and the book is money and all of these things are just out there in the open. $30,000, $10,000, this is how we ran things.
Money was a magical green energy. You used anything instantly. And we understood what money was, we loved it.
But that's what made me respect Jim Baker too, I have to say. I mean, I'm not saying he was like a singer, and he's really fun. But what I respect is, as opposed to other leaders and other groups, you know, some that I've seen, you know, some of the few bad apples or whatever, or however many are there, is that he was really into self-examination, and so he would have these, you guys would have these meditations every morning where he would tell stories about his past, his life, right? And he says that he would reveal even these really ugly things that he'd done in the past because he wanted the family members to learn from them. So there was this ruthless self-examination, trying to turn it into wisdom for the people. And instead of doing things like, I don't know if you know about, or what you know about Yogi Bhajan's mistresses, but Father Yoga was not into hiding his mistresses at all. Like so many organizations, the leaders have, mistresses who are men, they're gay, and they hide it, and then it comes out later in this explosive thing. I thought it was very interesting that when he started to take on the other women, he did take on other women, it's true, he broke his commandment, but he did it openly. And he said, Robin, this is what I'm doing. You can stay or you can go. And then he tried to build in, this was not in the documentary or in the book, really, but the family became essentially a matriarchy after he took on the other women, because he had the women, Isis especially, was one of the main leaders of the family. He really wasn't interested in the day-to-day thing. He wasn't interested in controlling people and telling people what to do. And so it became a matriarchy with the passive patriarch, ultimately.
I asked a question about the matriarchy after his death. So, Pushkin, on the 2-year period for leadership, could you speak a little bit more about that?
Well, there was, when he passed over, nobody ever thought he was going to leave the body. It was like there was nobody in the family as a whole respected. And God forbid that I took over. I was a dragon lady, Nobody saw Robin taking over. There was none of the sons were able to assume those shoes, that leadership. It fell by default to Makushla because Makushla was with him. She was not with the family. She was his and with him, and nobody had any drama with her. Nobody had any problems with her. And she's a very kind person to begin with. She's a very gentle, kind person. So she was very safe, and she was like, he said, this is my soulmate. This is my woman. This is my soulmate. And he loved her. And so for the family as a whole, she was the only one that stood out to hold us together and take command until we could figure it out. So she kind of by default assumed leadership, and she never wanted it. And the family stayed together 2 years. We should have just done it sooner. But, the women as the mothers of the family and the council, it was very confusing, the breakdown started right away.
So there's a lot of fighting. We couldn't put that in the documentary either, but there's a lot of internal discord and no money, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say fighting, but a lot of discord and no money, and people started to think, okay, now what am I going to do?
So we have just a few more minutes left, and before we end, I want to take the discussion to Professor Taves' happy place. Religious experience and unusual experiences. A lot of people out who study religious movements like to explain why people belong to them in sociological terms, psychological terms. They have a place, they have a family, they have a home. It seems like for a lot of the people in the film, what really anchored them or made them take that leap into the family was an unusual experience that couldn't be explained away.
That is so good.
And could you speak to that?
Many of us, if you talk to any of us, we all have a story. And in that story, some way or another, we will all say, we were guided, we had dreams. Some people drew pictures of him before they even met him. Some people were told to go to the source. They just got into town and they needed a meal. It was instant. I would say almost everybody, it was instant. It was like you knew. People were being guided to the yogis or the ashrams. This was a group of people that was not their thread this lifetime. We were all, this was our thread. And we knew. I knew instantly. You know,
I recognized him.
we all knew instantly, and there was never a question. It was instantaneous with most all of us. We knew we were supposed to be there.
And my question was usually when someone has an experience like that, it's very personal, it's very individual, it's very unique. What bridged that gap that everyone is having their own unusual experience, but it's all being understood collectively as meaning the same thing? Or
Because we stepped into his frequency, which uncoded our frequency, and we start vibrating instantaneously at a level at one time. You know, spirit is its own language. And you know and you understand without having to say anything, without knowing on this level. You start operating really on another level. If you get really high on drugs, or Kundalini goes off, it's the same thing. You know instantly. You are in the zone. And that's what happened. We're instantly in the zone, and that was it.
Do you feel like everybody recognized him as like a past life connection? I mean, you guys really.
That's my understanding of it. I'm sure there might be people, I'm speaking for the majority.
That they felt when they had this physical connection that it was a past life connection?
It was a very familiar thing that we could not explain or understand until you understood, okay, there's reincarnation, now I understand it. And that's what it is. And now has a name that fits what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And it wasn't all good, you know, we didn't have, he said we were a karmic group. Now karma can be good, karma can be bad karma. You know, not everybody liked each other, but we were okay because we were being held together by the glue of that person. It's when he left that we started dealing with each other.
And Opie told me that he believed that you guys were the reincarnation of the Essenes. Is that,
We associated very much to a lot of past life situations. Yeah.
How many total members were there over time?
We have we have a name and number list, and there's close to 600 people that came and went. We had a core of 150, I would say. But we usually have around a couple hundred. There was always a core of 150. Pretty much that.
And then another question that relates to another question earlier, and that's, did he have a library, like a book library that was saved?
He would get excited about something, and then we'd all have that book. You know, there were, like I said, things back then. There wasn't a whole lot available that really got us excited. And when we found something, it was like gold. You know, and we did have a little library. It wasn't expensive, I wouldn't say, no.
Was there a point when you got rid of the library? You just said those.
Oh, that was part of the journey too. It came where we collected jewelry and books and amazing, beautiful things. Then the next day it was okay, everything's gone. We own nothing. Get rid of your jewelry, get rid of the teachings, get rid of the books. You don't need any of it. You know? And the reason a lot of that survived was because people sent stuff home. I did. And my mom passed over, and I went and cleaned out her house. I found stuff that I had sent her, so it survived. You know, I got to have it back. A lot of family members have those stories. Things they've sent people. You know, oh, this is great, this way, come join us, you know. Or even we found music that way. There was a real tape that was sent to a friend in Chicago by one of the musicians. And he was going through his basement, and he went, you know, 40 years later, he went, oh my God, I got this reel, I'm giving it back. Otherwise, that wouldn't have survived. And some of us hit things. There's just certain things that I was like, I'm not giving this up. And so you find things to kind of find little ways to maybe think about it.
okay, so we are almost exactly at an hour. So I would like to thank all the panelists for their participation.
Thank you.
And feel free to stay around, but not for too long. Thank you, everyone, for